This hour with an environmental story. The grip of drought that is intensifying in the West has led scientists to turn.
They are small, overlooked, yet astonishingly powerful. Beavers. Most people think of them as little tree-chopping troublemakers, nuisances in streams and rivers. But scratch beneath that reputation, and you discover creatures capable of reshaping entire landscapes. Across the American Southwest, where water is a treasure and life clings desperately to every drop, beavers are quietly performing miracles. Pools of water glimmer where there was once only cracked earth. Soft green vegetation pushes through soil hardened by decades of drought. And this isn't a story about chance. It's about intention, about humans finally trusting nature to heal itself. The idea seems absurd at first glance. Who in their right mind would release thousands of dam-building animals into some of the driest landscapes in the country? It sounds like a tale better suited for a late-night bar than a serious ecological experiment. Yet that is exactly what a determined group of scientists dared to do. These are not creatures of myth. They are real, tangible agents of change. Small, furry engineers, their teeth and instincts can redirect water, capture it in channels, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, restore life. To many, the beaver is a nuisance, a destroyer of timber, a minor headache in streams. But in the hands of careful ecologists, their destructive tendencies become tools of restoration. Water doesn't just appear. It needs time, a home, and patience. And in a desert where seasonal rain vanishes within hours, where rivers retreat and dry, beavers are becoming the unexpected stewards of survival. They dig, gnaw, and dam. They create micro-reservoirs, tiny oases that collectively begin to transform the desert. It is a quiet revolution, one that unfolds without headlines, without fanfare, but the results, as the scientists would soon see, are undeniable. In a land that many considered lost, life finds a way, not through human engineering, but through the instinctual brilliance of an underestimated species. California, and much of the Southwest, face an invisible crisis. We often imagine water flowing freely from snow-capped mountains, spilling into rivers and streams, but in reality, much of the water that sustains life comes from the ground, hidden deep beneath the surface. Groundwater. And this hidden resource has been steadily depleting for decades. Droughts have become longer. Rivers that once roared in spring are now nothing more than cracked scars etched into the desert. Soil, baked hard by relentless sun, struggles to hold even the smallest amounts of moisture. Entire ecosystems teeter on the brink. Plants wither, animals vanish, and the delicate balance that supports life begins to collapse. Traditional methods of water restoration have proven expensive and often fleeting. Retention basins, irrigation networks, engineered dams, they take millions of dollars and years of labor to construct. Even then, the results are temporary. Rain may come one season, flow may return briefly, but the underlying problem remains. The land has forgotten how to hold water. Enter the beaver, a species long misunderstood. Early fur traders noted how beaver ponds transformed barren landscapes, almost overnight. Native tribes revered them as sacred builders, capable of summoning water where none existed. Their dams didn't just hold water, they shaped entire ecosystems, turning dry meadows into wetlands teeming with life. The stakes are enormous. Without intervention, the Southwest could see entire rivers vanish permanently, wildlife populations collapse, and human communities face growing scarcity. Yet, using beavers as ecological engineers offers a potential solution both natural and sustainable. It is risky, audacious, and, at first glance, mad. To most observers, the idea of placing water-loving beavers in some of America's driest corners seemed reckless. But to the small team of ecologists who understood the animal's abilities, it was the last hope. Not a gimmick, not a publicity stunt, but a calculated gamble with the future of entire landscapes resting in the balance. This is a story not only about survival, but about the unexpected ways nature can be a partner in restoration. And it begins with creatures most of us dismiss, ignored by history, yet capable of miracles hidden in plain sight. The plan sounded reckless, even to the scientists themselves. Relocate beavers, thousands of them, from northern watersheds, where they were abundant, to hand-picked sites in the dry American Southwest. The land they were targeting was a canvas of desolation, rivers reduced to dust, soil cracked like old leather, and ecosystems teetering on collapse. At first, even the scientists doubted themselves. Who would trust small, furry animals to do what centuries of human engineering could barely manage? The idea of using beavers as living engineers seemed absurd. Yet, the more they studied the animal's natural behavior, the more logical it became. Beavers didn't just survive in the wild. They created life-sustaining water systems wherever they went. From 2022 into early, the boldness of the idea lay in its simplicity. No concrete, no pumps, no expensive infrastructure. Just nature, acting according to its instincts, guided and observed by human hands. It was a partnership, one that required patience, faith, and the willingness to risk failure on a scale that few projects could afford. To outsiders, it looked like madness. Skeptics scoffed. One hydrologist dismissed the idea outright. "We don't even have flowing rivers half the year. How could beavers possibly make a difference here?" But the scientists continued to watch, week by week, as evidence began to defy expectations. Small dams multiplied, water lingered, and the land slowly remembered how to breathe again. This was more than an ecological experiment. It was a leap of faith. And as the first beavers settled into their new desert territories, no one could predict just how far their instinctual engineering would go. The first weeks were tense. Scientists watched the newly relocated beavers with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Every gnawed tree, every burrow dug, was a potential sign of progress or failure. The desert was unforgiving, and even the slightest misstep could undo weeks of careful planning. At first, the results seemed modest. Beavers constructed small dams along shallow channels, pools formed but were fragile, and some of the animals disappeared for days, retreating into burrows as the sun scorched the landscape. Observers began to question their gamble. Had they underestimated the harshness of the desert? Could these creatures adapt to a world so unlike the rivers and streams they had known? Even among the ecologists, doubt crept in. Maybe this was too ambitious, one whispered during a monitoring session. Maybe the desert will simply reclaim them. The tiny pools shimmered in the sun, promising little more than hope. For the first time, the plan that had once seemed audacious now teetered on the edge of despair. Yet in the midst of uncertainty, subtle signs of change began to emerge. The first dams, small and imperfect, held water longer than expected. Moisture seeped into banks long baked hard by decades of drought. Shrubs tentatively pushed through the soil, roots reaching into newly saturated ground. Life, fragile but persistent, was returning in increments almost too small to notice at first glance. Local observers began to whisper about the strange phenomena occurring along dry channels. Pools of water appeared where there had been nothing but parched rock. Birds returned, cautiously at first, dipping into the shallow pools. Insects buzzed in the wet soil, and small mammals began to explore territories that had been inhospitable just weeks before. Nature itself was responding to the beavers' quiet engineering. Skeptics remained unconvinced. "It's temporary," some insisted. "A fluke of rainfall, nothing more." But the scientists, patient and meticulous, noticed the pattern repeating. Each dam, each small pool, created a ripple effect, slowing water flow, softening the soil, and encouraging plant growth. The desert, long thought lifeless, was showing signs of revival. The suspense was palpable. Every week brought new evidence. Yet the question remained, could this initial trickle of change develop into something permanent? Could a few dozen beavers restore balance to landscapes that had been broken for decades? And if so, what would that mean for the future of ecological restoration? For now, the experiment teetered between uncertainty and promise, but hidden in the modest beginnings of tiny dams and glimmering pools was a question that would drive the project forward. If beavers could thrive here, in one of the harshest landscapes in America, what else might they achieve? Then something remarkable began to unfold. What had started as small, tentative efforts soon transformed into tangible success. Tiny pools behind the beavers' modest dams lingered far longer than anyone expected, surviving long after the winter rains had faded. Water, once fleeting, began to hold its place. The desert soil, cracked and unforgiving for decades, softened beneath the gentle persistence of these small engineers. The first signs were subtle. A few shrubs took root along the edges of newly saturated banks. Birds, cautious at first, returned to dip into clear, calm waters. Insects buzzed where none had been seen for years. Yet, even in these small victories, the scientists recognized something extraordinary. The desert, long thought unable to sustain life, was beginning to heal itself. Locals, long accustomed to dry, empty channels, began to notice the changes. "I never thought I'd see water here again," one resident whispered, eyes scanning a glimmering pond. Pools, once an anomaly, now appeared with growing frequency. The initial trickle of change had transformed into a quiet, unstoppable momentum. The experiment, once limited to careful observation and small expectations, now hinted at something far larger, a blueprint for ecological restoration powered by instinct, persistence, and the remarkable capabilities of a species long underestimated. As the months passed, the transformation accelerated. What had begun as modest, isolated pools evolved into a network of interconnected water bodies. Each beaver dam acted as a keystone, slowing water, spreading it across the land, and allowing it to seep into the thirsty soil. The desert once, fractured and silent, was awakening. Clusters of dams began chaining together, forming small corridors of life. Water that had once rushed away in a matter of hours now lingered, soaking deep into the earth, feeding shrubs, grasses, and young trees. Birds returned in flocks, butterflies danced over the newly wet meadows, and small mammals cautiously ventured into areas that had long been inhospitable. The ecosystem was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. Scientists watched in awe. Week after week, they recorded changes that defied expectations. What had seemed like a pilot project was now a larger ecological phenomenon. The first generation of transplanted beavers began raising kits of their own, extending the experiment beyond human planning. The animals were multiplying, building new dams, and expanding their reach into areas the scientists had never predicted. For locals, the change was nothing short of miraculous. Farmers noticed water holding longer in channels, small streams began to trickle through areas once barren, and the landscape took on a subtle greenness that had been absent for decades. Stories spread of small ponds appearing in places long considered lifeless, each one a testament to the beavers' silent engineering. Even skeptics could no longer ignore the results. Hydrologists, ecologists, and desert specialists began revising assumptions about the limits of restoration. The evidence was clear. When nature was given the chance and guided wisely, she could perform feats no human project had ever achieved so efficiently. Yet the impact went beyond water alone. Soil that had baked hard for decades softened and began to retain moisture. Seedlings sprouted in areas previously inhospitable, forming the first signs of a new, self-sustaining plant community. Microhabitats emerged. Small pools nurtured amphibians, insects, and aquatic life, creating ripples that extended far beyond the original beaver territories. The scientists realized they were witnessing more than a localized success. This was a living model for how ecosystems could be restored using natural processes. The beavers, once dismissed as mere rodents, had become master engineers, architects of renewal, and unexpected allies in the fight against environmental degradation. The experiment, once small and tentative, had grown into a movement. With each dam, each pool, and each new generation of beavers, the landscape continued to recover. Life that had been on the brink of collapse found refuge. Water returned to places long parched, and hope, once scarce, now flourished. By the time the first generation of kits matured, the impact was undeniable. What had started as a daring gamble had become proof of nature's extraordinary resilience. The desert, long considered broken, was teaching humans a profound lesson. Sometimes the smallest creatures hold the greatest power to heal. By the time the first generation of transplanted beavers began raising kits of their own, the experiment had already outgrown its pilot phase. The trickle of change had turned into a steady current. And soon, it wasn't just scientists paying attention. Locals, ecologists, and conservationists alike began to see what had been possible when nature was trusted to lead. The story of these beavers is more than a tale of survival. It's a testament to the hidden potential within the natural world. Small, often overlooked creatures, working according to their instincts, had revived land once thought lost. Rivers that had vanished returned in glimmering pools. Soil once baked and cracked softened. Life, fragile yet persistent, found a foothold. Once again, it is a story of audacity, patience, and unexpected partnerships between humans and wildlife. It reminds us that solutions to even the most intractable problems may not always come from technology or massive infrastructure, but from the quiet, persistent genius of the natural world. In the harshest corners of America, life has returned. And it did so not through human dominance, but through collaboration, respect, and a little help from some small but mighty creatures, the beavers.